points in it now, as Manu Gonzalez's World Championship lead is now on wafer-thin ice. After a 7th place finish in Australia, trumped by Diogo Moreira's 3rd place, which could be worse from a Gonzalez point of view. That's why the World Championship lead, which started the day at 8 points, has now been shrunk to 2. Still, mathematically, 5 riders have a chance of winning the Moto2 World Championship, even if most realistically we are talking about a 2-horse race. Lewis Sotheby and Neil Morrison, as always, with you for Moto2 Practice. First thing on a Friday morning. Any better poise, Neil, as we get set for this Malaysian Grand Prix. A circuit that Manu Gonzalez is talking big, expecting this to suit him. He's only going to have 2, just 2 points now between the big 2.
I think we've had 19 races, Moto2 action in 2025. 2 points separate the top 2 in the championship. And what a brilliant spectacle that was with Phillip Island less than 1 week ago. In that top 2, going at it, hammer and tongs, pretty much right the way through. And to encounter Phillip Island. They also included this rider here, Alan Canet, who eventually fell back down the order, complained of just a lack of front end feeling through at Grand Prix. And saw that reflected in his late race rhythm. He held on the order and able to really push for the podium in those last couple of laps, but Canet still is unbelievable despite such a kind of barren run of form. 35 points back at the championship summit. 3 races to go. Happened to Gonzalez or Moreira this weekend's race. Canet in a decent place to really point on that.
Well, to underline why Canet is still in contention, in the last 5 Grand Prix, Aaron Canet's only scored 33 World Championship points, but Manu Gonzalez has only scored 43. They certainly could have put Aaron Canet completely out of the equation by now, missed that opportunity to do so. Contrast, Diogo Moreira, he's notched 72 points in the last 5 Grand Prix, which is why he has roared into title contention. Now right on the tail of Manu Gonzalez. 3 Grand Prix to go. Most recent visit on our Grand Prix schedule was a golden day for the boy who represents the green and gold of Australia, Senna Aegis, who we flagged up on Friday. It's very rare that we call it spot on, but I think we did in Phillip Island a week ago. Senna Aegis looked the class of the field in practice on Friday. His long runs certainly indicated that he had the kind of pace and performance to win the Australian Grand Prix. Many, and I don't think even Senna in his wildest dreams would have ever expected to win in quite such a dominant fashion.
Yeah, it was quite remarkable just how easy it looked for Senna up at the front. There was a few close calls early on in the race when he ran in a little bit deep into turn 1. Who said Aegis in a little bit because Jake Dixon has a new crash helmet design for this weekend. Jake unfortunately lost his granddad a couple of months ago, and his granddad spent quite a bit of time out here in Malaysia in his lifetime, so Jake commemorating him with that special one-off design for this weekend. It's very quick indeed, and yeah, very nice story behind it as well. Dixon will be looking to narrate him with a good result as well, as he showed Phillip Island. Good place for him. A little bit underwhelmed, I think, by the performance of his Boscuro chassis, if he was being completely honest at the end of that race. He was right in the mix of it for that podium hunt, and at the end of it, this rider here was ahead of that fight for second, which at one time had 10 riders.
Yeah, it's not cold this week, David, but it's rather chilly in our air-conditioned commentary box. The air conditioning cracked up to full blast, so you hear us losing our voice later on the weekend. You'll know the reason why. David Alonso really had to show how physically he's adapted to Moto2 challenges in 2025. Really did put him to the test. I'd say when the Grand Prix came to a close, how he was suffering from pain in his arms and his legs. Manoeuvred that Spa Calyx around Phillip Island to take a 2nd place. First podium for him since that victory in Hungary, where he certainly qualified well in the race since then, but not converting any of those into a podium until Phillip Island, winning, as Neil mentioned, a battle royal for 2nd place, which featured both of the Aspar teammates in the end, 2nd and 4th for the rookie pairing.
Brilliant debut offers for the Aspar pairing. I think going into next year, both David Alonso and Danny Holgado will be fancying their chances of the title push, because it was another brilliant performance from young Danny. You can see here what he does his pre-session ritual, where visualizing where the track goes and considering what Marcus is going to be using to brake, also which gear he'll be in. A brilliant performance from Holgado. Did have a bit of an underwhelming start to the race in Australia. He was as low as 10th on lap 5, and we're starting to worry that his podium potential might not materialise, but a brilliant late recovery saw him climb up the order and just hit Jake Dixon for 4th place at the flag. And when you consider, Lewis, that he lost pretty much all of Friday afternoon's running at Phillip Island due to that pretty scary crash up at Woodley Heights. We were fairly limited on dry track running as well, and I think that makes Holgado's performance on the Sunday all the more impressive.
Could well have been a double podium for Aspar had he not made a mistake when he was rampaging through that podium pack. Here, back in 2022, one of the more dramatic finishes for the Moto2 Grand Prix. Tony Arbolino and Igor, of course, made that crucial mistake into turn 9, which not only cost him a 2nd place at worst on that particular afternoon, but ultimately played a part in costing him the Moto2 World Championship. Arbolino, unlikely you'd feel at this stage that he's going to add another Malaysian Grand Prix victory here this weekend. Failed to score last time out in Australia on a weekend where we expected the Boscoscuros to excel, but ultimately outside of Dixon they did not. So his teammate a moment ago, Dixon's teammate that is, Philip Salach, a moment ago in the Alphamar VDS box, and I guess a delight for us all, Neil, at least to see Philip Salach leathered up and heading out on track this morning.
Yeah, there were some doubts as to whether Philip would be fit enough to ride this weekend. That right shoulder that he injured all the way back in Assen was tweaked in a massive moment at Friday at Phillip Island, which led to him withdrawing from the Grand Prix on Saturday. He has turned up and will attempt to ride this weekend. Let's see how far he gets into it. Robert Philip yesterday, and he seemed in fairly upbeat spirits. Of course, for him, Guevara will be looking to repeat his feats from 1 year ago here. His first ever Moto3, or his first ever Moto2 podium at this circuit 1 year ago. See some of the local fans here in attendance on Friday morning in Malaysia.
Yeah. Hello to you too. Yeah, I certainly know they are creative in their support of all things MotoGP in this part of the world. I'm sure it was here, wasn't it, last year ago when we had a fan heralding Jack Appleyard's role as the president of the IR for Asanto fan club. They show their support in various different ways and fashions here.
Yeah, they certainly do. It's the big spot for fans from the north of Australia to come up to as well. So the likes of Perth. Find that coming to Malaysia is actually a little bit cheaper than going all the way down to Phillip Island. Certainly finding accommodation, I think, is a bit easier in Kuala Lumpur. It is down around cars on the island. So usually a decent Australian contingent here as well in the grandstands.
No, it's bought from outside of Malaysia, which does account for a lot of the attendance here. I think around a quarter of those have been snapped up by Aussies for this Grand Prix weekend, which they will have a couple of riders to cheer for in this Moto2 class. Senna Aegis, of course, we've already seen. Harrison Point, who continues to take the place of Unai Aradre, the MSI squad. The session does get underway. I guess while we're on the subject, we might as well just tidy up some other pieces of housekeeping for you, as is always the case here at the Malaysian Grand Prix. We do have 2 local wildcards, and in fact they're very easy to spot. Petronas branded pit boxes directly opposite us here in the commentary box. 2 riders that we have seen before on the Moto2 grid. Number 20 of Azroy Anwar, who did previously wildcard here in 2022 and 2023, and a 3-time Asia Road Racing Superbike winner here at Sepang already this year. Teammate to him this weekend, another rider we've seen before. We saw him here last year, Mohamed Helmi Azman, making his 2nd Grand Prix appearance, both part of the Petronas MIE Racing RW squad on board Calix chassis. So free practice 1 underway, and we guess a wait to see. It won't become clear until we get later into the weekend just how important a session like this might prove to be, because it's fair to say that the weather forecasts, which are always rather temperamental in this part of the world. If you were with us yesterday for the Gear Up show, you'd have seen about 3 changes of weather conditions, even during our half-hour broadcast. So myself and Jack Appleyard received a bit of a soaking midway through the show. But there are certainly some forecasts, Neil, that are suggesting that some heavy rain could be heading our way by the time these boys are back out on track for practice this afternoon.
Yeah, you never really know exactly what the weather's going to do here in Malaysia, and I have been struck by how cool it is. Normally when you make your way from the car park over to the media centre in the morning, it's already blazingly hot, very, very humid as well, and you find yourself wiping yourself down with sweat once you get to the media centre. But I have to say, it's not in at all. I mean, it's not cold by any stretch, but it's certainly a lot cooler than when we normally visit here in Malaysia. I particularly enjoyed during the Gear Up show yesterday. You darting off while the camera was still on you to try and get some shelter while poor Jack was still stuck under the heavens.
I was up in there. I was out of there. I was laying around in the pouring rain for too much longer. It's beginning to get a bit dark overhead. Manu Gonzalez right now. That's the current championship situation. 2 points in it between the top two. And remind you, we brought it up last weekend when we came on the air in Australia. Manu Gonzalez was 60 points ahead of Diogo Moreira at the summer break point, following Moreira's non-score in Brno, which of course came from a late start. But Manu Gonzalez, the stat remains, as I told you a week ago, Gonzalez has beaten Moreira in a Grand Prix only once since then. But we said that Manu was going to have to go on the attack ultimately in Australia and start thinking about beating Moreira and winning races rather than just managing a World Championship lead, which had been slashed by that disqualification in Indonesia. Ultimately, the events of Practice Friday left Manu with no choice but to defend.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good stat that you pointed out there, Lewis. I mean, Gonzalez has just outscored Moreira once in the last 7 races. That was in Barcelona. He's definitely not had momentum on his side. I guess there's 2 ways to look at his Phillip Island Grand Prix. I mean, you could say it's another chance where he came up short in a direct fight with Diogo Moreira, and they were probably banging bars a lot of that race. I haven't seen them actually really come up against each other that often in the championship this year, despite the fact that they're both the most prominent riders going for the championship. But from another point of view, you could actually say that Manu Gonzalez actually rescued a decent result from what had been a very, very tricky start to the weekend. A massive crash on Friday morning down at the Hayshed, dusted himself down, didn't have a great Friday afternoon, then put it on the front row on Saturday, despite losing all of Saturday morning to try and improve his dry setting because it was a wet session. Then to be up there fighting the first half of the race at least on the track that he doesn't necessarily like, I thought was pretty decent going. So I'm inclined to give Manu the benefit of the doubt and think that yeah, we'll probably see something a bit more like his early season self here this weekend. I'm not sure what you think, Lewis.
Well, how good a result it ultimately was in Australia, I think, will be determined by what happens next at Grand Prix venues, which he and the team are saying are much more up Manu Gonzalez's street. Sepang topped him out where he was on pole last year, and the finale in Valencia, which of course the Spanish rider is going to know like the back of their hands. Yeah, as you say, the way it was looking on Friday, he would have, I think, perhaps signed for maybe not a 7th place, but I think if when Manu Gonzalez was sliding through the Grand Chapter of the Hayshed, if you told him there he's still going to win the World Championship when we leave Australia, I think he might well have taken that and said, yeah, do you know what, absolutely fine, we'll just set up a 3-race championship now from now to the end of the season. He did still finish ahead of Aaron Canet, and Barry Baltus was only 1 position ahead of him, so only lost 1 point. So it has almost, to all intents and purposes, unless both Gonzalez and Moreira non-score this weekend, it's pretty much boiled it down to a 2-horse race in the World Championship. Manu can put himself, I guess, in a position now where all he has to do is watch Moreira, beat Moreira, and he'll leave the weekend happy.
Yeah, for sure. I think losing just 7 points, I know 7 points are a big amount at this time of the year, but you know, considering how bleak it was looking at some points during the Phillip Island race weekend and how strong Moreira was on the Friday, perhaps at that particular juncture in the weekend we thought it would be a bigger loss for the number 18. So yeah, he's still in the championship lead. I did catch up with him briefly just before he was leaving the track, before the MotoGP race started at Phillip Island, and it's just so cool. He's the personification of unflappable. We've said that so often this year, but he was like, yeah, it was a decent race. I was fighting with Diogo at the start, but just lost too much rear tire in that fight, and was really on the ropes in the closing laps. This isn't a good circuit for me. He was like, just wait until next weekend. I'm pretty confident that everything will come together then. So Gonzalez certainly wasn't showing any signs of progression getting to him after that race in Phillip Island. And as you said, Lewis, he has had a pretty decent record here. I think this was the first third time that we saw him fighting for podium positions in Moto2 in his first year. Back in 2022, it was when he was with Grissini. It's the first time where you thought, okay, he stepped up from being a kind of edge of the top 10 rider to potentially being a rider in the podium fight. So this place has brought some good memories for him in years gone by.
The crashes that he had, because he also had a crash in practice on Friday afternoon, what they particularly costed him was dry running. So of course, we saw on the Saturday morning mainly wet, certainly mixed conditions, free practice do session. So those who did have crashes or problems on Friday were really penalised. The weekend unfolded. We'd see something rather similar in terms of a weather pattern this weekend. Of course, temperatures, as you can imagine, significantly hotter than they were in Phillip Island, where the thick end of 15 to 20 degrees hotter in terms of air temperature. Of course, track temperature we're expecting to be very much into the high 40s, if not the 50s of track temperature by the time we get to practice this afternoon, even with the cloud cover we have here in Sepang. And it is going to provide a very different kind of challenge of both man and machine than we saw in Australia a week or so ago. Early stage in this free practice one session, but it's certainly looking a lot better at this early junction than it was at any stage in Australia for the Boscoscuro contingent. Tony Arbolino, Jake Dixon and Philip Salac, your 1, 2, 3, Ethan Guevara and Ivan Ortola on their Boscoscuros 6th and 7th. And is, I guess, that one of the perhaps big surprises or one of the big disappointments of the Australian Grand Prix, a circuit that Boscoscuro have pretty much owned in previous years this weekend.
Yeah, they were well off, weren't they? Jake Dixon up there inside the top 6 with a 5th place finish. He was just a second off, second place, so it was...
you need to look at the other Boscoscuros just to understand how good a ride that was.
Exactly, yeah. Jake was 10 places higher and 15 seconds faster over the full race distance than the next best placed Boscoscuro rider, who was Alonso Lopez, all the way down in 15th place. We've been saying all weekend just what a star Alonso Lopez had been at Phillip Island in years gone by. 2022, so there's an early crash for Zonta van der Goorburg. Looks as though that's down at turn number 9. It's claimed its first victim in this Moto2 class. So was it going to be a little bit before that? We've seen a second crash, I think, for even Ortola.
Ortola's gone down the corner for that by the looks of it, down at turn 8. Van der Goorburg has made it one corner further around. You can see right hand side of that Boscoscuro pretty much scuffed up. Won't please the title sponsors. It is a right-hander into turn 8. The yellow flags are back out, I think, purely because Ortola is trying to recover his bike onto the racetrack from there. We referenced turn 9 already as the corner where Aigura crashed out of victory contention in the final lap in that 2022 battle. It was such a tough corner, scrubbing off speed down to around about 55 kilometers an hour on a Moto2 bike. This is turn 9 that Ortola's rather to Boscoscuro is making his way through. We're now going to have a look at what happened to him into turn number 8. The number 4 who saw his 8-race point scoring streak come to an end last time out in Australia when he was certainly part of the Boscoscuro club who struggled so much. Ortola finishing down in 18th place, not helped by being pushed off the road at turn 1. I think we're going to see the Van der Goorburg crash first. There he goes, front end washing away on the way into that first gear hairpin. And at the other end of that back straight, further back down the road, back into turn 8, which is just at the back of the picture there, where we saw Ortola go down.
You see a few more of those crashes, like the one Zonta van der Goorburg just suffered this weekend. Turn 9 is a real problem spot through all the Grand Prix categories. That is pretty much a carbon copy of the crash that was in last year's sprint, which proved so costly in his World Championship defence. We look into Celestino Vietti. We were just talking about the Boscoscuro's struggles and Phillip Island. Well, it seems to be slightly different so far over this session with Boscoscuro's 1, 2 and 3. Victor was saying all through the long corners of Phillip Island, just the lack of turning that he was experiencing was so pronounced compared to the characters. I think with this slightly softer tire allocation, rear tire allocation that Pirelli are bringing this year, it's as if the Boscoscuros just have too much grip, and it feels like it's almost being pushed towards the outside of the track through those long corners that we have at Phillip Island. And he was saying that the Calixes around him are pretty much able to just pick and choose their lines, whether it was around the outside of him or underneath him. Actually, through turn number 3, I think, was a place where he was having particular difficulty. And yeah, that just persisted right the way through the race, and he was really gutted to have missed out on the podium. He felt that he was riding as well as he has done at any point during the season, said to me afterwards it probably ranked among his best ever rides in the Moto2 class. And it was one that he had earmarked going into the weekend. There's a real chance to add to his winning tally in this category before he moves across to also the bike next year. So yeah, real frustration there from Dixon, but you have to say, give it absolutely everything. And to finish, what, 15 seconds ahead of Alonso Lopez, around a track that Lopez was previously so strong at. I think that tells the whole story.
Just to underline how badly Boscoscuro struggled, as Neil mentioned, there was 15 seconds between Dixon and Lopez. Those were your first and second Boscoscuros across the line. Lopez was the only other Boscoscuro point scorer last weekend, and the other Boscoscuros, with the exception of Harrison Boyd, of course, who was replacing the injured Unai Radre, they all finished together. Lopez, Guevara, Arbolino, Altola and Vietti were 15th to 19th, and all pretty much together on the racetrack. And of course the Speed RS Boscoscuros of Chelsea Vietti and Alonso Lopez, well, they qualified way down the field. Vietti down in a season's low 25th place, his worst qualifying for 4 years. Jorge Navarro, last year's Malaysian Grand Prix pole sitter, has joined the Turn 9 club. Lopez only qualified a few positions higher up in 20th, only to secure that final point.
I think we can say Lopez and Vietti haven't been brilliant, but we've certainly seen flashes from both Arbolino and Guevara, the Pramac riders, in recent rounds to suggest that they're at their best levels this year. There is another turn 9. Slow speed get off for Jorge Navarro with just tucking way in there. It does look as though there are a few damp patches still around this track. The times have actually been quite competitive so far in this session. Tony Arbolino's fastest time with a 2:05.2 is actually less than a second of Jorge Navarro's all-time lap record, which was set in qualifying last year. That's a 2:04.4, so that must be in decent enough condition if we're already second of the all-time lap record.
You referenced the Pirelli tyre allocation this season. They have gone much more aggressive this weekend, but of course they were going to in Australia, one of the most savage circuits from a tyre point of view. Given the information, of course, that Pirelli had from this Grand Prix last year, they have felt compelled to bring up the development version of their super soft rear tyre here this weekend, in addition to the SC0, which is officially in the Pirelli allocation of the soft tyre. It's the harder of the two rear allocations this weekend. So we have the SC1 soft and the SC2 medium front tyre options available this weekend. As you can see, Vietti's front end chattering away a little bit on the box through the fast turn 5. It's already looking a little bit more positive for Vietti and Boscoscuro than it did any stage in Phillip Island. Vietti produced one of his great Grand Prix rides here 1 year ago. His first Grand Prix back from the injured shoulder he sustained in Phillip Island. Came back here and won the Malaysian Grand Prix.
Absolutely insane performance from Vietti 1 year ago. No one saw that coming. Gonzalez getting a little bit out of shape coming through the final turn here, turn number 15. But all is okay, and Gonzalez has had a very steady start. Best of the Calac chassis so far in 5th place, and just reference Diogo Moreira down in 14th. So decent first 15 minutes of the session so far for the championship leader.
The other title contenders then, so we do still have 5 mathematically. Jake Dixon's 57 points, but I believe that he's going to drop out of mathematical contention this weekend. He really does need to win this Grand Prix and hope that Gonzalez and Moreira are off the podium to still be alive to Portimao in a fortnight's time. Dixon at the moment in 2nd place. Barry Baltus, who produced one of the rides of the Sunday without question in Phillip Island. Baltus on the number 7 is currently down in 19th place, and he's at 42 points back. So may well keep himself mathematically in contention at the end of this weekend, but perhaps won't go to Valencia with still a say in the championship conversation. Cadet 35 points adrift, so he's still just about on the fringes of this Moto2 title battle. He's currently 8th in this session, with, as Neil mentioned, Moreira and Gonzalez currently 14th and 6th respectively. Here's a look at the Navarro crash, which runs away into turn number 9. Now having to brake and sort of turn on the angle while you're still braking into turn number 9. Second of what will be several riders to go down there already this weekend. As mentioned, Navarro was on pole position here for the Malaysian Grand Prix a year ago when he was a substitute at the American racing team. A weekend and a performance which certainly contributed to him getting a full-time spot on this grid again for 2025.
It's real bolt from the blue. We had American racing 1-2 in the bolt last year with Navarro first, Marcos Ramirez in second, and both riders inside the top 6 on Sunday. This has been something of a good track for Marcos Ramirez in years gone by. But Navarro having a tricky start to the weekend, as has much of his season been, unfortunately. It's been to really ride home about. Navarro just 2 points scoring finishes all year long. He finished second here last year, as Lewis said, so really not been going to plan for the Clint Ford factory team. We were just mentioning some in the championship contenders there, Lewis, prior to that, and just want to give a quick shout out to Barry Baltus, because what a ride he enjoyed at Phillip Island. Baltus, we didn't really mention it during the Australian Grand Prix, but he had been sick as a dog in Indonesia. Really bad case of food poisoning, which had just knocked him for 6. Wasn't able to eat for 3 days when he was in Mandalika. But somehow he managed to come home in 4th in that particular race. He said he was still feeling well off colour in Australia. More than a week later, he was obviously able to eat and take fluids on board again, but still wasn't feeling it at 100%. Baltus had an absolute nightmare opening to the Grand Prix. Found himself all the way down in 22nd place at the end of the first lap. Yeah, he came through in real swashbuckling fashion, and his rhythm towards the end suggested that maybe if he had put away well at the start, maybe qualified a little bit better than he had done in 10th position, potentially been the one rider that may have taken the fight to center agency. He was certainly telling that to me after the race. He said, if I qualified better, I think I could have fought for victory today. But the fact that he came home in 6th, then he was back in 22nd so early on, it was quite the turnaround.
Yeah, he found himself on the outside of turn 1. It was he and Ivan Altola who were sort of bumped wide through Doon Corner. And as Neil mentioned, Baltus was 22nd in the first lap. In terms of the time that he lost, well, at the end of the first lap, Barry Baltus was 4.6 seconds off the race lead. He only ended the race 5.3 seconds off the race lead. Now, of course, there's some caveats to throw into that. Center Aegis certainly wasn't pushing on the final lap, would have won by slightly more than he did, had he not been sort of taking in the adulation, quite rightly, of his home crowd on the final lap. So you also have to factor into that the fact that Barry Baltus was overtaking a bunch of people partway through that Grand Prix. So I think at the very least, it's realistic to say that Barry Baltus would have been in that battle for second place and might well have finished second in the Grand Prix had he come through the first lap somewhere near where he started in 10th place. Question, there was a podium there for Baltus, and had he achieved it, then we'd have been talking about Barry Baltus potentially going up ahead of Aaron Canet into 3rd in the World Championship, but still a real contender with 3 races to go. Certainly feels that it's probably going to run out of time from Baltus' point of view to still fight in the championship, but the very fact that we're having that conversation at the 20th round of 22 this season, and Barry Baltus still being a Moto2 championship contender just underlines the quantum leap forward that he has taken in 2025. But still, finish ahead of his practic teammate Aaron Canet to take a 3rd place in the World Championship.
Yeah, top 3 in the championship for Baltus would be an enormous achievement from where he finished last year. Baltus was, what, 21st overall in the championship in 2024?
Propped up a lot by the points he got in Qatar.
Exactly. I think there was this crazy run between the first race of last year and maybe the 15th or 16th race. He didn't score points between Qatar and whatever the 16th race of the season was. There was this crazy run where he was obviously going through a lot of issues off the track and yeah, just not very competitive on it either. But, yeah, what a turnaround it has been for Baltus. I did not think we would be talking about him as even an outside championship contender. Speaking at any point in his career, really, he hadn't done a great deal to show that he would be capable of that in years gone by. Yet he's really been the revelation of Moto2 in 2025. And so take a look at the rider that is currently fastest, Tony Arbolino, down in his box. He's having 1 or 2 uncomfortable moments under braking. As Lewis said, this has been a decent place for Arbolino in years gone by. A winner here in 2022 in Moto2. And was also up inside the top 5 at the end of play last year. I think that Arbolino does go well here, does enjoy its track, and Boscoscuro had some decent performances here in years gone by. Remember, Albuquerque was absolutely devastating the dominant romp to victory in 2023. The same day in which Pedro Acosta wrapped up that year's championship. So, reason to believe that Arbolino could be on for a good weekend here.
I've seen some Moto2 title glory here over the years. Just in 2023 with Pedro Acosta. Back in 2019, of course, Alex Marquez reaching the Moto2 crown right here.
That with Pecco Bagnaia.
Indeed. Bagnaia in the costume change, and he couldn't get his bike started, could he, in the celebrations after the race. Ayumu Sasaki has had a bit of an uncomfortable ride through turn 13. He's now explaining to the team exactly how that felt on board the bike. He's another rider who deserves a shout out from the Australian Grand Prix. Sasaki taking the best qualifying in his Moto2 career, backing that up with the top 10. He was firmly in that podium battle, wasn't he, in the early stages, until arm pump struck for the second Grand Prix Sunday in a row.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a bit of an issue for Ayumu in the last couple of weeks. But what a brilliant ride that was. The first time we've seen Ayumu up there fighting for the podium in the Moto2 class. And yeah, bumped into his girlfriend Mercedes just after the race, and she was telling me that the arm pump has been really quite pronounced the last couple of Grand Prix and has really caused him to drop off towards the end of the races. We saw that in Phillip Island where he was up in 5th or 6th and then dropped down to eventually finish in 10th. They think it's obviously too late now to undergo arm pump surgery before the end of the season, so they want to keep trying and basically just going the distance until Valencia, and then they'll have some surgery in later November, or once pre-season testing in November is finished in December. So yeah, Ayumu was straight to the Chiron clinic after the race to get some treatment on his arm, because I think it really had gone quite numb in some respects. Great to see Ayumu starting to look like a proper contender in Moto2 class, because at one point you did worry that maybe it wasn't just going to work out for him. There were a couple of rumours earlier this season linking him back to a seat in the Moto3 category, but yeah, we can safely say in the second half of this season that he's taken a big step forward. Starting to see the best of Ayumu, like we saw in Moto3.
To a point this season until Ratton have been a fairly regular point scorer since then. Points finishes in Australia, Indonesia, Japan. He's won the last 4 Grand Prix, Austria, Saxony, also points finishes since he opened his account back in the Netherlands. Just a word on his teammate, by the way, Zonta van den Goldberg. He is back out on circuit now, and going down the road at turn 9. A crasher early on in the session, as you just saw. Ivan Artola was also back on the racetrack. Keep an eye on Van den Goldberg sector times. It was just a glimpse of him we saw in the back of the picture. He's on course at the moment to get himself right into the top 10 at this stage. It's still Arbolino, Dixon and Vietti, your Boscoscuro 1, 2, 3 across 3 different teams. Blue Crew Pramac from Mark VDS, from Speed RS. Danny Munoz for the Red Bull KTM team, who won this Grand Prix with Vietti last year, 4th. From Philip Salac, 5th, who has put in 9 laps this morning, and it's right about in line with what everyone else has been doing. So certainly no immediate signs of Salac struggling with his shoulder. We'll hopefully get some further information from him as we go through the day, how he is. Gonzalez, the points lead at 6th. Paloma de Reina, Sarah Canet, Ethan Guevara and David Alonso in 10th place. Gil Herrera has been shuffled back to 15th place now. He is a second off the pace.
Yeah, but let's not judge Moreira currently, because we know you see it better as the weekend continues. We are 25 minutes into this session. I think we deserve the race winner from last time out. Probably deserves a bit of mention. But we think Lewis, was we obviously touched on the fact that Senna Ages had a pretty comfortable ride to victory this home Grand Prix, but just dwelling on that for a minute, what a performance that was. Just the kind of control that he was able to assert on the pack from, what, I think about 6 or 7 laps in, when he pulled away and he made it look so easy and so comfortable. I was not expecting him to win. I was certainly expecting him to fight for victory, but I thought he would have to work a lot harder for it than he eventually had to do.
I think the main thing he had to adjust to and understand was the wind on the Sunday in Phillip Island. It was certainly buffeting the riders. It was perhaps at its most strongest during the Moto3 race that preceded it. But he did have a couple of moments into Doohan Corner, turn 1. The pretty strong tailwind there was really pushing the riders in to that first corner. But certainly once the battle unfolded behind him, Agius was comfortably in a class of his own. The margin at the end over David Alonso was 3.6 seconds, but in truth he was a lot stronger And that might indicate. So you go through the closing laps of the Grand Prix. His lead was over 5 seconds before he backed off on the final lap. Said it was such an incredible experience that he lost his voice on the in-lap. He was screaming the whole way around the in-lap as he was taking in the applause and appreciation of his home fans. It's the first Australian ever to win the Moto2 Motorcycle Grand Prix of Australia. There have been many Aussies who've given it a good go in the intermediate class. And he just breaking new ground and underlining that it's with another year's experience under his belt heading into 2025. And 2026, excuse me. There's absolutely no reason why AGS can't be looking at 2026 as a season where he can aim for that level on a more consistent basis.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when Senna has been on it this year, it really has been something to write home about. Picked up his first victory in Silverstone and then backed that up at Phillip Island. And well, a couple of things were really impressive. Namely, the fact that on Friday afternoon, as we were saying, throughout the weekend in Australia, when Senna was clearly faster than everyone else on longer runs, he was able to do laps in 1:30s, when everyone else was dropping off slightly into 1:31s. And going that Friday must have put Kendall with the pressure on his shoulders. Yeah, it didn't really seem to affect them throughout the rest of the weekend. Sometimes riders talk about that moment where they look at the time sheets at the end of the session and they think, oh wow, way faster than everyone else. I remember Jake Dixon talking about this in 2022 when he eventually won his first Grand Prix and said, great expectation that suddenly you start putting on your shoulders thinking, this is my chance. But it didn't really affect him at all as Dixon has just jumped up to the top of the timesheets. And
a new all-time lap record in free practice 1 for Jake Dixon. He's 8 tenths clear now of the field. He and Diogo Moreira have both gone out, I'm going to assume, on brand new rubber. Is it the super soft rear tyre for Gonzalez, trying to catch the red banding on his rear tyre? Difficult spot when he's going at that speed, and Mona at the final corner clearly cost Gonzalez time as he goes into 4th place. But the goalposts have been moved significantly by Jake Dixon in this early stage of the weekend. 2:04.264. That is 10th and a half quicker than Jorge Navarro's pole time of a year ago.
so we're going to get the lap record absolutely slaughtered this weekend if this session is anything to go by, just as we saw in Phillip Island 1 week ago. Just going back, just to finish up on AGS quickly. He was saying that he had a conversation with Casey Stoner going into the Australian Grand Prix. I think he spoke to him on the Wednesday. He said to Casey, yeah, it's a big weekend ahead. And Casey said, don't think about that. Just think of it as any other weekend. And he said, it's super important to have a really good Friday. And Casey said, yeah, well, if it doesn't go on, don't worry. It's okay. Always amend that on Saturday. I think having Casey's experience and wisdom really just helps him to take a bit of a deep breath and not put too much on the fact that it was his home Grand Prix and treat it like any other.
With Dixon then into turn 14, which is famous for absolutely nothing in Grand Prix history. Honestly, nothing of note has ever happened at that particular corner in the past. Jake Dixon making his way then into the final corner, which was reprofiled around about 7 or 8 years ago. It's now a negative camber final hairpin. So a variety of lines are taken here. Dixon taking a very late apex here. The negative camber sliding towards the outside of the racetrack. Dixon 2:03's here. He is very close at 2:04.131 now. His advantage 7 tenths over Albert Arenas. As it stands, is the only other rider within a second of the 96.
Pretty impressive flex this from Dixon at the end of FP1. It's pretty fast right out of the blocks, but he's stuck in that super soft rear tyre. I assume he's put on the super soft rear tyre. He is absolutely annihilated. But let's see if Manny Gonzalez can narrow that gap down ever so slightly. Jumps up into third, but still in at 7 tenths off in second position. So Dixon in a bit of a class of his own as it stands. He doesn't have the happiest of memories here from a year ago, does he? This is a race that maybe he would rather forget. After he miscalculated the number of laps in last year's race, thought he had secured third place, and yeah, was mortified to realise that yeah, there was still 1 lap to go.
In fairness to Dixon, they put that down to slightly faulty dash, which gave him some incorrect information as the race was coming to a close, at least from an asphalt point of view. His slip-up did at least hand a podium to his teammate at the time, Ethan Guevara, who was the grateful recipient of that third place. It was the 96. Closing in once again on Moreira. Moreira third, fourth, should I say. Gonzalez has taken third place from him on that last lap. Gonzalez now into the 2:04s. Checkpoint Aaron Canet, third in the World Championship. He's in 12th place at the moment. Certainly at this stage hasn't put on a brand new tyre, or hasn't set any laps on a brand new tyre. He is just starting his first time lap on his current run. So we might see the 44 launch himself up the order very shortly. So Lopez now enters turn 1. Into his final 3 Grand Prix now on board a Boscoscuro, and he moves over to the Rossini squad on board a Canex for next season. His trend of results will indicate that Lopez is pretty pleased to see the back of that Boscoscuro chassis. He's been in qualifying 1 in the last 3 Grand Prix now as Lopez, eliminated in it in the last 2.
Hasn't been in the top 10 in any of the last 4 races, which it's in it all year for a rider that was fighting for the championship, even if he was always slightly doing so from an outside position last year. It has been a very underwhelming season for the number 21. Did miss a decent chunk of pre-season with nasty and finicky finger injury, and really since then we haven't seen the best of him at any point this season. All that Scuro's overall lack of competitiveness has hit him probably harder than anyone else. Score roster.
Turn 3 by the looks of it, or maybe on the exit of 2. Yellow flags are out in the first sector. Usually push on the way out of 2 into high side. Tony want to be going down through turn 3, which is one of the fastest corners. In fact, is the fastest corner around this circuit. Joe Roberts, who has gone down, and it is in turn 3. His teammate Marcos Ramirez certainly notched up a pretty hefty crash bill for the American racing team the last weekend. And Joe Roberts, who had just set his personal best moments before that, and gone up to 11th place. He's gone down. He's gone down in the heart of turn 3. That's 4th gear at around 175 kilometers an hour.
As you said, Lewis, somebody that you do not want to be following Sepang International Circuit. Let's hope that Joe is okay. The last thing that he would want is another injury going in through an off-season like the one he suffered last year. Fingers crossed for the American on there at turn number 3. Somewhere that you really don't see riders falling very often, is it, Lewis? Turn 1 and turn 2 are certainly problem points at this track, but turn 3 very much left, so you can see our flags still waving there. Flags of Manu Gonzalez going into this sector, and there is Joe Roberts. That is really been a big one. He's being stretchered away. This is what happened.
He's lost the shot at 2, hasn't he? He's lost it at 2, lands hard on his back there. Of course, we caught it in the bike at one stage as well. Jake Dixon, that would have taken the air out of his lungs, and I think he was immediately favouring his hand there. And when he got up, clearly recognising immediately that he'd hurt something, stretched it away from the scene. So we hope that Joe Roberts is okay as a result of that. We saw that he was conscious, but clearly in an awful lot of pain.
Understandably so. It's crossed for Joe. It's been a bit of a rough session. There's been plenty of crashes, hasn't there? It's been a very fast session, but also plenty of crashes to start the weekend off here at the Sepang International Circuit. And more heavily than that by Joe Roberts. I mean, it was initially just a bit of a rear end slide, but the fact that he then got caught up with the bike as a shape was in the sea. So the American is okay. Be okay to take part in the rest of this weekend.
And amongst all of that, we've seen Arenas close the gap on Jake Dixon now down to a 10th and a half. Arenas has found a 2:04.292, which is also under the old lap record. Moreira, who we're now looking at, is into 3rd now. 2:04 from Ricardo, Arbolino, Canet, Gonzalez. We'll go back down to 7th place now. Still very early stage in the weekend though, so no one in intact will be panicking too much. The greatest concern at this stage of the weekend will be Senna Aegis' relatively modest start to the session. Aegis down in P20 at the moment on a 2:05.776. He's 1.6 seconds off the pace. Just perhaps not with the greatest experience around this Sepang. He did race it last year, but didn't make it to the end of the first lap when he was taken out by Alberto Sura into turn 9 on lap 1.
It's just a shot of team manager Jürgen Ling there on our screens. You seem to recall Jürgen telling us last year that perhaps it was just a little bit difficult after the previous year's success at Phillip Island, and Senna took his first ever Moto2 podium to come here, and it was a tricky weekend for the Australian. A slow start here at FP1, but we are still talking about the first session of the weekend. Still very much early days, and that one relative lack of experience up against many of his rivals on the grid here. Certainly would have raced here in the Asia Talent Cup back in the day, but maybe not as much Grand Prix experience as some of the riders we see at the top of time sheets.
3 weeks of this session remain there. Shelstone Vietti, last year's winner, comes our way. Sizable straights here to bookend the lap. Run from 14 up to the negative camber 15. See once again there, Vietti the inside of the track, plenty of space. You can see there too, good view there from the shot, just making your way through the corner of just how much the camber falls away from the inside of the corner. Vietti now takes 5th, 2:04, 6:44. He's up with the Mobile 2 in this session, up into P12. Actually, weekend in Australia was very much compromised by a grid penalty that dropped him down to 19th on the grid, and found himself in the wrong group entirely during the Grand Prix, which cost him some points. And here are your top 2 from a week ago, 81 and 80. It's Alonso who goes up ahead with Senna, Agius. So on course to move himself well into the top 10 with this, down in 24th place at the moment. Perhaps a little scruffy on the way out of the final corner, which brings Aegis right onto his tail again. How much time has that cost Alonso? Not much, as in Prince up into 3rd place.
And so 2 Aspar rookies right in the mix at this early stage of the weekend. Alonso in 3rd, Holgado in 5th. If I make that 4th, Holgado's just improved again, and it's been a crash for both of the MSI bikes in this session. We saw even Artola crashing earlier on in this session, and now Harrison Voigt, the number 29, has fallen coming through turn number 4. Thankfully that was a front end crash rather than a rear end crash coming out of turn number 4, and Harrison is straight back up his feet after checking his right glove. Everything is okay. A full experience for Harrison back at his home Grand Prix a week ago to learn a completely new bike. It's a Kalak chassis in the European Moto2 Championship as opposed to the Boss Squirrel, which he's currently on. But after learning a new frame during a weekend when it was really up and down, and it only really happened about 2 full dry sessions to the ride before you jump into the race. I mean, he was up against it, wasn't he, going into the Sunday there?
The hope is that Unai Radre, the regular in that team now, of course after the early season split with Sergio Garcia, he'll be back in Portimao in a couple of weeks' time. He's essentially given a couple of races to rest up an injury that he prevented in Matecki, because he is fighting for the European Moto2 Championship at the moment. So to give him the best possible opportunity to be fully fit for the next round, which comes in a week's time. Radre given a couple of Grand Prix off as Alonso looks to close the gap a little further to pick it up at the front. Now on 2 of the faster flowing circuits of the kind of Tour de Riders circuits, as they say. However, Alonso really has stepped up and stepped forward in that Aspar team. Once again, he has got to grips with his early season qualifying woes and his difficulties early in the Grand Prix. A brand new tyre. Lost 3 Grand Prix in the front 2 rows of the grid. So he crashed out of the Tony battle in Indonesia. He was finished 4th and 2nd in the 2 Grand Prix either side of that. So Alonso certainly cemented himself as a frontrunner in Moto2, although it looks like it has come a little too late for Alonso to snatch the Rookie of the Year prize from this man, Danny Holgado. Holgado 166 points to his name. He is 49 clear for his teammate Alonso, which means that Holgado scores 2 points here this weekend in Malaysia. 2 points, should I say, more than Alonso. Holgado will be crowned Rookie of the Year this week.
I have to say that will be a formality in the final 3 races. So Gonzalez looking a little bit on the corner exit coming out of turn number 14 onto the back straight. So we'll end here inside the top 7 or 8 positions. In fact, it is 10th, so improves in time, but not in position. And it's certainly not a swashbuckling start to the weekend for the number 18, the championship leader. So be slightly concerned with the fact that he's about 5 places and 3/10 of a second off Herrera at the end of the play.
Normally, as you say, it's a bit of a calling card for Manuel Gonzalez to go there and free practice 1 and immediately lay down the gauntlet to his opposition. I wouldn't say he's necessarily done that this morning. Jake Dixon perhaps with more description with his performance so far today. Our title chasers. It's on a third of the, well, 4 of them, or 4th of the 5 of them, depending on how you feel about Jake Dixon's prospects from here on in, behind both Dixon, Moreira, and this man, Aaron Canet.
To say too much too soon. If this continues, I would say the alarm bells might start ringing in Gonzalez's ears to be offered Phillip Island, which has never been his track in the past, is one thing, but be offered here at Sepang is a previously very strong record. I think that would maybe start to be a point of concern. But as we say, Friday morning, always read a great deal into these results.
We'll be watching the weather forecast very, very closely. One thing Manu Gonzalez does not want at this stage of the championship battle is a rain-affected practice session later on.
That's a very good point indeed. The conditions have been his Achilles heel in 2025. Actually got a little bit better through the year. By no means would you say he's one of the more competitive riders. What a great session that was for Jake Dixon. Gone from one of his best ever Moto2 rides, in his own words, at Phillip Island. Might yield the podium finish there, but he's come out swinging here this weekend with a new crash helmet and has pulverised the previous lap record by a couple of tenths a second. A 2:04.1 is a new Moto2 lap record. And Dixon, 10th of a second clear of this rider here, Albert Arenas, at the end of play.
He's also been talking quite tough recently. He feels he's had the pace in recent rounds to pick up a podium, but for various reasons hasn't quite come to pass. The main reason being poor qualifying. Hasn't qualified on the front 3 rows in the last 4 rounds, but has in the last 3 made up ground in the Grand Prix itself. Arenas through 10th to 5th in Indonesia, 11th up to 8th in Australia, and he was on the back of that podium group, right behind Manu Gonzalez at the checkered flag. But after that poor qualifying, he left it way too late in the end. Arenas already serving notice that he could be in the fray this weekend. And of course, as we've discussed this season, the Moto2 campaign, we've seen 16 different riders stand on the podium and 10 different winners. It's not just going to be a straight battle between the title contenders. There are plenty who might want to interfere with the World Championship contenders this weekend. Jake Dixon with a new all-time lap record, Moto2 Practice 1 then, ahead of Albert Arenas and David Alonso. Daniel Holgado completing a 3-4 for Aspar. Your first genuine title contender, Diogo Moreira 5th for Chelsea Vietti, Tony Arbolino and Aaron Canet. Ethan Guevara, podium finish hero a year ago, 9th. Obviously, the Manu Gonzalez completing the top 10. Barry Valtis, who's still a title contender, mathematically 11th ahead of Philip Talat, whose shoulder did make it through this first session of the weekend in one piece within a second of the pace. Crashes in that session for Jorge Navarro, Zonta van den Goorberg, Ivo Artola and Harrison Bolt. Of course, that big ball for Joe Roberts, who we wish the very best to. But it is Jake Dixon who tops free practice 1 here in Sepang. And we'll begin our MotoGP weekend in a moment with their free practice 1 session coming your way next.